started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on DOE's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs website, along with copies of today's PowerPoint presentations in about 1 week. Everyone will receive a post-webinar email with the link to the page where the slides and recording will be located. Because we are recording the webinar, all phones have been muted for this purpose. We will answer your questions at the end of all the presentations. However, you can submit a question at any time by clicking on the question button located in the webinar control box on your screen and typing your question. And if you've entered your audio PIN when you joined, at the end of the webinar, you can also click on the raise your hand icon, and I will unmute you. And you can ask the panel your question directly. We'll try to keep the webinar to no more than 90 minutes. We have several speakers today, so let's get started with opening remarks from Lizanna Pierce. Lizanna is a program manager in the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs. Duty stationed in Golden, Colorado, Lizanna is responsible for implementing national funding and financing programs and administering the resultant Tribal Energy Project grants and agreements. She has more than 20 years of clean energy technology, project development, and management experience assisting tribes in developing their energy resources and building their energy visions. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from Colorado State University and has pursued a Master's in Business Administration through the University of Northern California. Lizanna, it's a pleasure to have you back to give opening remarks, and the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, Randy, and hello, everyone. I join Randy in welcoming you to the 6th webinar of the 2016 series, and especially I'd like to thank Sarah and Travis for giving us their time today as speakers. This webinar series is sponsored by 2 U.S. Department of Energy organizations, the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs and the Western Area Power Administration. The series is designed to promote tribal energy sufficiency and to foster economic development and employment on tribal lands using renewable energy and energy efficiency technology. The Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs directs, fosters, coordinates, and implements energy planning, education, management, and programs that assist tribes with energy development, capacity building, energy infrastructure, energy costs, and electrification on Indian lands and homes. To provide this assistance, we work within the Department of Energy across government agencies and with Indian tribes and organizations to promote Indian energy policy and initiatives to help Indian tribes overcome the barriers to energy independence. To help tribes overcome the barriers, the office has developed several programmatic initiatives and partnerships. This Tribal Renewable Energy webinar series is an example of the type of education and capacity building efforts we have developed with our other DOE partner. Today, the webinar attendees will learn about tribal energy, clean energy for sovereignty and economic development. As most of you know, Indian land contains an estimated 5% of all U.S. renewable energy generation potential. The significant potential in renewable energy resources on tribal lands represents an untapped opportunity for tribal economic development and points to clean energy deployment as a vital pathway to economic sovereignty for tribal nations. In addition to improving economic health and the quality of life in tribal communities, energy development can support stronger economies in the surrounding region. Today you'll hear from Forest County Potawatomi community about clean energy activities and projects that they are pursuing specifically because of their vital linkage to economic development. You'll also hear from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Travis, about the tools, models, and resources available for assessing the potential economic impacts of these clean energy projects, and tools and resources to get you started with planning in renewable energy projects that directly support your economic development locally. We have another 5 webinars remaining in the series, and each new webinar builds upon the previous. The foundation is strategic energy planning and the often undervalued or overlooked benefits of economic development in the strategic energy planning process. In each of the 2016 monthly webinars, we've been trying to include tribal case studies and information and hands-on tools that you can use to progress towards self-determination and energy independence. And we welcome any ideas or input you would like to provide on this series. However, before I turn it over to Randy, I did want to take a moment and remind people of an important deadline coming up on July 1st regarding DOE's Quadrennial Energy Review and your ability to provide input into this process. And I'd like to take a moment to give a little bit of background. On January 9, 2014, President Obama issued a presidential memorandum directing the administration to conduct a Quadrennial Energy Review, QER. Informed by the June 2013 President's Climate Action Plan and in response to a 2011 recommendation by the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, the administration-wide QER enables the federal government to translate policy goals into a set of analytically based integrated actions, executive actions, legislative proposals, and budget and resource requirements for proposed investments over a 4-year planning horizon. The Secretary of Energy provides support to this QER task force, including the coordination of activities related to the preparation of the QER report, policy analysis and modeling, and stakeholder engagement. So the administration is seeking public input on key questions related to possible federal actions that would address the challenges and take full advantage of the opportunities of this changing system to meet the nation's objectives of reliability, affordability, and clean electricity. Over the course of 2016, DOE has convened a series of public meetings centered on the topic of the second installment of the QER, an integrated study of the U.S. electricity system from generation through end use. So if you'd like to provide input into this or find out more information, you can search DOE QER, and it'll provide you a tremendous amount of information and background, as well as an online form to provide input. And with that, I'm going to turn the virtual floor back over to Randy.
Thank you, Lizanna. And our next two speakers today are Travis Lauder and Sarah Drescher, and I'll introduce both of them now. Travis is a renewable energy analyst at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. His research centers on solar PV finance and financial innovations, market analysis, and renewable energy policy. He also works directly with municipal governments, universities, tribal nations, and other public and private institutions on technical assistance matters related to PV, economics, tax implications, capacity building, and training. Travis holds an MA in International Development from the University of Denver and a BA in English from the University of Colorado. And then following Travis is Sarah Drescher. Sarah is the Forest County Potawatomi Community's in-house environmental and energy attorney working out of the tribe's Milwaukee office. Sarah's energy-related work for the tribe includes a range of issues related to the tribe's green energy initiatives, including development of green energy, implementing green energy projects, and commenting on energy policy. Ms. Drescher is involved in the tribe's Class 1 Air program and all other matters related to the tribe's environmental and energy programs. Prior to joining the Forest County Potawatomi Community Legal Department, Sarah worked in the Milwaukee offices of 2 national law firms representing a variety of clients in the areas of environmental and energy law. And Sarah has a BA and JD from Marquette University and is working to complete her PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. And so with that, we'll start with Travis. And Travis, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thanks, Randy, and thanks everyone for taking your time to join the webinar today. I'm going to talk a little bit about renewable energy potential for economic development on tribal lands today, and then we're going to just briefly cover 2 tools that could be useful to doing some analysis to that end for tribes looking at these projects as economic development opportunities. We're going to cut this up into 3 sections. Randy, if you go to the next slide, we're going to start with some high-level economic development concepts, and then we'll get into the tools, and then the last section is just a brief sort of where you can go for technical assistance if you need help with these tools. So next slide, Randy. We show this at our project finance and development trainings for tribes. This is a sort of range of the benefits you can capture in completing a renewable energy project. We're going to focus just on this leftmost column here, the economic benefits, and Randy, if you click one ahead, there's a little animation there. Oh, so if we go up to slide number 3, we should be one up. Yep, right there, sorry. So we're going to be focusing on jobs, energy savings, and possible income from projects. The extent of the benefits and the type of benefits will depend on the size and scale of the project. So if we go to the next slide, we've generally broken these up when we do these trainings into 3 scales. Facility and community are both on-site and are principally for energy offset. So the generation technology you install on-site or near the site will be used to feed electricity to the facility, so that facility does not have to make energy purchases in the amount they're receiving to the utility. And then we've got the commercial scale below that, which is it's a financial play, really. It's building a renewable energy project to sell the power, sell the energy to a utility, or to host that project and collect lease payments from a private developer. And so next slide, Randy, please. In either case, you're looking at returns on this project. If you're building it to offset the facility or facility use or the use of a cluster of buildings, you can plow those savings that you're earning. You can treat those savings as revenue, and you can plow them back into community investments. It's the same thing if you are earning a lease revenue, if you're hosting a privately owned project, or if you own the project and you are earning revenue from the energy sales. There's all sorts of ways you can apply these income streams. You can invest in facilities, parks. You can invest in social programs, expanding a social safety net, schools, healthcare, etc. You can issue fiscal stimuli to the household level, either through direct payments on a per capita basis, distribution, or incentives for homeowners or household spending. You can, of course, use the savings to fund your next renewable energy project and create a general program through which you are capturing increased revenue, either through savings or, again, through income via lease or PPA sales. And, of course, you can be creating jobs through these projects. If you are generating enough income to create a new position or create a new agency, if the project is making a good deal of money, then you might be able to fund, say, like a sustainability position or something like that, someone who's going to be able to see through the implementation of, say, a renewable energy program or energy efficiency installments, etc. So you can always initiate projects to sort of build on that directional sort of thinking, either in renewables or efficiency. So next slide, Randy. Just to talk about the kinds of jobs here, and we're going to go into this just a little bit more when we review the model, the JEDI model, towards the end of my presentation. If we're talking about job creation, not necessarily about income streams, but actual jobs that will amount to increases in household income on the reservation. The on-site jobs are sort of the direct labor that will accrue to household income. Jobs that renewable energy projects can generate include truck driving, all kinds of earth moving, blading ground to make it flat for solar field or wind farm or something like that. Again, the amount of jobs and the type of jobs will depend on the scale of the project. Smaller scale stuff will require less of these on-site construction jobs, and then the larger scale stuff is going to require more folks participating. If you go to the next slide, Randy, those are the on-site jobs, and then you're looking at sort of secondary impacts. These are supply chain and other. These are your multipliers. So if you bring these construction jobs onto the reservation, then you're going to look at some other industries that will be affected in the supply chain. If the tribe, say, has a business where they provide transportation, they provide trucks, etc. They have materials manufacturing. Those businesses might see a bump in their sales. Things like financing, banking, and accounting, positions like that have connection to the project, they might see some activity as well. And then the next slide, Randy, are your induced impacts. So these are the sort of after the secondary effects, the general economic impact within the community. So if you're bringing more workers onto the reservation, or if you're increasing household spending on the reservation through direct jobs, then you're going to see uptake in activity in local businesses, restaurants. You might have child care for folks that need to drop their children off while they go to work on the site, increased grocery store sales, medical services, hotels, etc., hospitality in general. So that's sort of the three grades of job impacts that you're looking at. But there's also this one category that doesn't always get modeled, and that's on the next slide, Randy. Job training and skills development. So we've got a few pictures here. Grid Alternatives, some of you may be familiar with this organization. They have a tribal program whereby they partner with tribes to do installations, mostly at the residential level, on tribal family properties, single-family properties and multifamily properties. And they will, the labor will be donated. They will procure the equipment and things, but because the labor is donated, you get a discounted price on your solar system. And that donated labor all comes from the tribe, and that is essentially, it's a de facto training program for tribal members. And while this doesn't necessarily equate to direct jobs, you know, because there's no payment, and then afterward there's no sort of guarantee that there will be availability for, or there will be a demand for the type of jobs in which these tribal members got trained. They do have the training, and they can either parlay that into off-reservation jobs, or again, if there's a renewable energy program that develops within the reservation, they will be candidates for hire there. And then this other picture here in the top left is the Moapa project. This is a project that's owned by First Solar, but Moapa did negotiate for tribal members to get jobs on site, so a number of jobs are created through the construction of this project. And then there's some ongoing jobs. I believe there's 8 spots reserved for the operations and maintenance, 8 tribal positions reserved for the operations and maintenance team. So again, this is an example of where you're looking at a giant project. This is a couple hundred megawatts, I believe, and they are job creation sort of expands with the size. And the operations and maintenance, the long-term jobs that come from that are they're a bit more, they're more available. There are more jobs available for larger projects. Operations and maintenance for smaller scale projects, usually there's not a whole lot to do, so that might be 1 or 2 positions at most if you're not looking at the megawatt level. So next slide, Randy. Just to talk about the tools now, things you can do to or use to do some preliminary analysis of your economic potential. The System Advisor model is a cost of energy calculator. It does a whole lot more, but that's sort of one of the most important readouts you're going to get from this model. It's available at that website listed at the top there, and it's essentially a project calculator. You go in, you enter your site You enter your project details and a whole lot of other things, and you're going to get granular outputs to the extent that you include granular inputs, right? That's the old sort of garbage in, garbage out adage, but it does have some pretty well-defined defaults, and these were derived from industry interviews and things like that. So the defaults are robust if you don't have a whole lot of information about your project. And you can do this if you're working with a private contractor or a private developer. You can use this tool to sort of fact check their numbers, and certainly if you're doing this development yourself, you can use this tool to do some preliminary estimates and see exactly what you're working with to sort of narrow in on a particular site and to determine the economics of that site and different technologies within your how they would perform within your reservation. So if you go to the next site or the next slide, Randy, this is generally how the tool works. You start with weather data, pick your location, you get a typical geological year file, which will help you once you enter the system specs like tilt and azimuth and all that stuff for solar and other specifications for other technologies. Those will combine to give you your electricity production per year, which will degrade at a certain level depending on what you put in there. And then you combine this with your cost data, how much is your labor going to cost, your hardware, your permitting, et cetera. You sort of create your bill of materials and what everything is going to cost. You combine that with your utility rates and incentives. So what are you, if this is on-site power that you're going to be using, on-site electricity generation, then what's the rate you're competing against and what are your savings against that rate and what incentives are available either through the utility or if you have an incentive available through your tribal government, you can enter that in there. And then you do the financial structure of the project, how much debt, how much equity, et cetera, what is that capital coming in at. All these inputs go to your outputs at the very bottom there, which is your energy output, your levelized cost of energy. That levelized cost of energy number is what you're going to be comparing against the utility rate. If it is lower than the utility rate, then you're making money on a per kilowatt hour basis. You're making money, and those savings you can do the analysis within SAM to determine how much you would save over a given period of time. Excuse me, and you can use that number to figure out what your return on investment is going to be, and then sort of go from there as to how you would use that capital. Other readouts you're going to get from the model are net present value, payback, things like that. So you can use this to essentially determine what your return is going to be on the project, and then what you can make a decision from there how you would invest that return. If you go to the next slide, Randy, please. The utility rate database is the largest source of utility data available on the web for free. It is a volunteer populated database, so you do have to sort of fact check it against what your utility is posting online. A lot of tribes are also they purchase power, electricity from their cooperative utilities. So cooperatives and municipalities, if they're smaller, may not be in the database. But generally, a lot of the major utilities are in here, and SAM pulls from this database. So you can do your analysis within SAM. There is an option to actually enter in if you don't have your utilities data in SAM in the utility rate database. There is an option to enter it in yourself. But these are all going to help you essentially maximize your use of the tool so that you're determining at a granular level what your savings would be. Next slide, please, Randy. So that was SAM. The next model that's going to help you sort of make some preliminary assessments is the Jobs and Economic Development Impacts Model. It's acronymized as JEDI. It's available at that website that's posted at the top there. It's an input-output model, which is a economic development impact model, generalized structure. It's an Excel model, so pretty easy to use. You just tweak some inputs, and then you'll get some outputs that are fairly robust. And again, it's going to depend on the level of sort of detail you have in your inputs as to how robust those outputs are. But it's useful for decision-making purposes. The defaults, again, like Sam, are based on industry interviews, literature reviews, et cetera. They're pretty well vetted. And it's available in a host of technologies. I just posted the photovoltaics one up here, but there's land-based wind, offshore wind. There's even fossil technologies available. So there's all kinds of stuff, all kinds of technologies that you can access. And there's a lot of materials, both for Sam, I should mention, and for JEDI, on the website available for users that are sort of self-training. If they need to bring themselves up to speed, they can access tutorials and things like that, and various papers that have been written on the models. Randy, next slide, please. Just giving you a sense of how this model works. This is the output page. So there's your input page. You're going to enter in project costs, various details about the project, and then you go to your output page, and you're getting these 4 columns here are the sort of the ones you're going to mine the most. You've got your jobs. The far left column is the number of jobs. The column next to that is the earnings. That's the total earnings for that number of jobs pool there on the left. Your output is a measure of total economic activity with your expenditures netted in there. And the last column on the far right is your value added. That's your GDP number. So if you want to know what the GDP of this project is going to be, or if you want to enter in that number at the very bottom there, you see that's bracketed in blue. If you want to enter that number into your total GDP numbers at a tribe level, at the sort of national level, what does this project contribute to our GDP? That's the number you would use right there. So that's sort of the top line number. That's the one that a lot of people are interested, not only for determining how it's going to impact at the macro level, but also, when they're in the decision-making process, that number is very useful in sort of presenting to your constituencies. Next slide, please. Just some quick comments on JEDI. The results are gross, not net. That means that jobs, when you get the number of jobs, say you're looking at your total, how many jobs am I going to create through this project, that does not consider how many jobs may be lost from other industries. Let's say from coal mining jobs or something like that, some industry that may be losing out on renewable energy development. So JEDI is just going to tell you what the project in and of itself is going to create. The net analysis is going to have to be done on a separate level. JEDI does not also factor in some of these far-reaching impacts, like changes in utility rates. That's a very relevant topic right now, as utilities are considering changing rates as more distributed generation enters onto their grid and more variable generation enters onto their grid. They're figuring out how to restructure, and JEDI is not going to measure that. So it's going to give you some more near-term, next couple of year kind of readouts. I should also mention that the results are annual. So when you're looking at the numbers that we saw on the previous page, that's within 1 year. If you're looking at a 2-year development time horizon, then you would just multiply those on-site construction jobs by 2, and then the operations and maintenance jobs remain constant after the project has been launched, right? So it looks at construction as a 1-year process. You multiply that by however many years development goes, and then your operations and maintenance jobs are the ongoing jobs after that, and the construction jobs go away at that point. Input-output models, moreover, don't estimate supply-side changes, such as, and there's examples here that I've got on the slide, technological improvements, changes in prices for various commodities, changes in taxes and subsidies and things like that. So again, those are factors you will have to weigh on a separate sort of decision-making process, a separate model maybe. JEDI doesn't evaluate project feasibility or profitability. That's what SAM is for. So using SAM in conjunction with JEDI can give you that information. SAM also has some capability to look into changing utility rates, not necessarily on an ongoing basis, but you can do an analysis to see what a particular project, what the revenue it would generate, the savings it would generate on a different utility rate. So that capability is available to you through SAM on a limited basis. And I should say for both of these tools that NREL has developed these for public use, but we do not have responsibility for how they're applied outside of our control. But if you do contact us for technical assistance, then you know, obviously we have some a little more say in the process, right? A little more responsibility for the information you're receiving. And on the note of technical assistance, Randy, if you go to the next slide, if you do need help, and then the next one, please contact the technical assistance team through the Office of Indian Energy, and we can help you run these tools, and there are plenty of other experts available to help with your questions. So don't be shy in using this form. Please reach out, and moreover, if you are interested in JEDI in particular as a tool in sort of your decision-making process, there is a seminar coming up in Portland in July. I believe it's mid-July sometime, which will be going over economic development. So we'll be going over this topic a little more in detail, and it will be going over the JEDI model in more detail, some hands-on experience. So you can access that through the Indian Energy website under Education and Training. That'll be information on that webinar is posted currently. So please go there and take a look. And that's the end of my slides. So thanks so much for your time, and I will pass it back to Randy.
Thank you, Travis. And Sarah, just give me a moment to pull up your deck.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's all yours, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Drescher. I am an attorney for the Forest County Potawatomi community, and as Randy mentioned, I do all of the tribe's environmental and energy work. So thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today, and certainly I think it's an important topic. So Randy, we can go ahead. Next slide. And the underlying approach for the Forest County Potawatomi community related to energy is based on the tribe's respect for the earth. And largely, a lot of these efforts have started with an environmental bent, and then remarkably, you find that there are a number of reasons that the economic development aspects become just as important. Next slide. So the Potawatomi is it's a tribe that is a confederacy with the Ojibwe and Ottawa, and the Potawatomi are designated as the keepers of the fire for the confederacy. Next slide. Based on the tribe's history, they were largely within the Great Lakes region all along the Lake Michigan, the eastern coast of Lake Michigan in Wisconsin. I'm sorry, the western coast of Lake Michigan in Wisconsin. And through a series of treaties, they ended up losing their rights to these homelands, but eventually established a reservation in northern Wisconsin. Next slide. And so this map depicts the majority of the reservation. Those other dots are areas where the Potawatomi also have holdings. The Milwaukee, in the lower right-hand corner on the map, that's the Milwaukee Casino and the Biodigester, which we'll talk about shortly. Next slide. So again, as I mentioned at the outset, a lot of the tribe's energy projects are based on their belief in protecting and preserving the environment. And one of the things that has been discussed amongst tribal members considerably for quite some time is how out of balance things have been. And the tribe has an incredible track record of fighting for environmental causes and protecting and preserving the environment for the use of not only the Potawatomi people, but also for all the other people of Wisconsin and really nationally in the world. Next slide. So these are a couple of examples of instances when the Potawatomi stood up to what the Potawatomi refer to as those who would abuse Mother Earth. The Crandon Mine opposition was decades long, and there is a large mineral deposit in northern Wisconsin located right next to the reservation. And if you know anything about Wisconsin geology at all, the groundwater table is very, very close to the surface in most areas. So digging a large pit mine, and we're talking very large, but digging a large pit mine is going to drain all of that water into the pit. Wisconsin also, although Minnesota is named Land of the Lakes, Wisconsin actually has more lakes and streams, wetlands, etc. So it's a very water resource heavy area. So this opposition was a very important movement for the tribe. In addition, the tribe has received Class 1 air redesignation and treatment as state status for the Clean Air Act and is working towards treatment as state status for clean water. Next slide. And this is just a list of some of the initiatives and projects that FCPC has been involved in. And I think one of the things that I'd like to point out is that a lot of these initiatives are interrelated. There's a real focus both on environment, sustainability, energy, climate change adaptation planning, green energy options, and economic development, and how all of these things kind of come together to create good projects that move the tribe forward in a number of different ways. Next slide. One of the main projects is Project Greenfire. Project Greenfire established for the tribe a goal of energy independence using only green, renewable, clean, or carbon neutral resources. And I think that, you know, largely the importance of this is based in the tribe's environmental perspectives, but what, as I previously mentioned, what we found is that just starting this process saved the tribe a considerable amount of money, and primarily through energy efficiency mechanisms at the outset, and then later with energy projects themselves. Next slide. So this is one example of the energy efficiency. The tribe has gone through energy efficiency upgrades at its casinos both in Milwaukee and in Carter, also at its administration buildings and several other tribal facilities. The casino itself, and the casino has not been fully, all of the implementable ideas have not been fully appreciated and realized. So there still are steps that the tribe will be taking, but the initial efforts alone cut down 12.5% energy use. Next slide. And this slide I like a lot. It gives you an understanding of exactly what it means when you do these upgrades and when you just do energy efficiency measures. And so for each of those kilowatt hour numbers, imagine multiplying that by anything from 4 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour, and that's the level of savings that we're talking about. So facility-wide, if you look at the bottom bullet there, 10 similar projects throughout the facility, total annual savings, 4,367,237 kilowatt hours. Now multiply that depending on your rate, and traditionally it's anywhere between 4 to 9 cents, and you really are creating an economic benefit. Next slide. In addition to the energy directive, the tribe views sustainability and climate change adaptation as important measures for partnering with green energy. If we build sustainable LEED buildings, we'll automatically use less energy. If we every new construction has to be to LEED standards, but then if we also consider green energy opportunities at that stage of planning for new development, we can have wholly self-sufficient buildings, which helps the tribe meet its goals of 100% energy independence. So, for example, the Potawatomi Hotel in Milwaukee is LEED certified gold, and that was based on the initiative by Executive Council that all new construction had to be LEED certified. And the construction of the building also includes sustainability measures that recycle a number of food waste sources, grease sources that go directly to the biogas facility, which is just across the street from the casino. Room controls are tied directly to a reservation system, so you save energy simply by not overcooling or overheating unoccupied spaces. And then a number of construction waste were diverted from landfills and repurposed, recycled, reused. So having an approach that builds off of sustainability but looks at a number of different sectors has allowed the tribe to really expand its portfolio in ways that previously hadn't been considered. Next slide. And this is the Gamma campus. The tribe has purchased an old, and you can go to the next slide, has purchased an old college campus in downtown Milwaukee. And this college campus was in considerable disrepair. Next slide. But the tribe had a goal of, again, sustainable redevelopment and including LEED certifications and energy upgrades and implementation measures. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about some of the tribe's more specific projects. The tribe has been very fortunate to receive several different grants through which they've incorporated green energy projects on a number of different tribally owned buildings and created a biodigester that they can use as both a unit to recycle waste from their properties, but also to take others' waste and generate tipping fees from that. Next slide. The Milwaukee Administration Building was the first of the tribe's solar installations, and this was completed in October 2011. And it's a relatively small project compared to some of our later projects, but it's 35 kilowatts of solar array on the roof of the administration building. Next slide. And so this was a grant that the tribe partnered with DOE on a renewable energy grant. We Energy is the local utility, and Wisconsin Focus on Energy. And one of the other things that I think is really important for tribes to consider, and I'll bring it up with this slide, because of the integration of the different groups. One of the really important things for tribes to consider is stacking incentives. So if you have a grant from DOE, but you can also work through Wisconsin Focus on Energy and other sources to stack various benefits, it can be very beneficial to the tribe. One of the projects that the tribe is currently working on is the development of a home energy audit and energy efficiency upgrade system. And through this program, obviously the tribe is applying for grants that may be applicable. But in addition, we will be working through the Focus on Energy program to try to have a tribal construction company certified to install and to perform these audits so that we can keep the money within the tribe. But then in addition, we can take that, once that tribal company is certified by the state, that company can go outside the tribe, and so the tribe can generate business from its experiences. So it's always important to look at any incentives that a state may have, in addition to federal grant materials and funds that you are receiving. Next slide. This is just a picture of the biodigester as it was originally proposed. Next slide. The biodigester is a 2 megawatt anaerobic biodigester. It runs off of waste food, grease, and organics. And it's located next to the Potawatomi Casino. The food is ground and liquefied and pumped into 2 stacked digesters. And then from there, the digesters work to break it down, create a gas that then generates, that then runs to 2 engines and generates the electricity. Now, there's a combination of tipping fees, and the electricity is sold to We Energies under a renewable energy tariff. Every utility at this point has a requirement to meet a certain amount of green energy. And so they do have tariffs that you can sell your energy to them for a specific price at the outset. Typically, these tariffs are negotiated for a certain period of time. So, it's not as though you put up the facility and then the work is over. There will be a point down the road where there will be renegotiations, or you will divert that energy back to your own tribal use or whatever it might be. Next slide. And this is just another picture. Next slide. And then along with the biodigester, there is compatible infrastructure, and the heat is sourced from the biodigester and pumped into a heat loop to the Potawatomi Bingo Casino and Hotel. So this allows us to use that excess waste product and provide heating for the hotel and casino, and that generates an offset against whatever electric bills would otherwise, whatever those electric bills would otherwise be for providing that same amount of heat. So presently, enough heat is available to offset the natural gas for heating all of the water at both the casino and hotel. There are additional considerations. We're always looking at ways to improve the operation of the facility and whether there are ways to offshoot from current production to create other processes. So right now there are ideas for compressed natural gas. Currently, because we're overproducing the gas, the biodigester has a flare and flares a certain amount of gas. So the tribe is looking into ways to compress that natural gas, and part of that is finding sources to use that natural gas. And then the tribe is also considering ways to incorporate a vertical urban farm. Now here again, you could use that heat from the generation process to heat a vertical urban farm, a greenhouse, if you will. And then we're also working on ways to reutilize the gray water, the wastewater that's coming out of the biodigester at the current time. And so all of those things are additional ways to both provide economic development opportunities, but also to promote sustainability. Next slide. And there are a number of different funding options and opportunities for tribes. And then one of the things that I think is really important is to consider ways that you can redirect funds. So if you can show a savings, if you perform energy efficiency projects in this year, and then you can show the savings of those projects in the next year, it may be worthwhile to ask Executive Council or whichever entity, whether or not you can redirect those savings into new energy projects. And that's one way to kind of generate a continuous scale and a continuous process of creating new projects. Next slide. And then additionally, I think it's really important to consider ways in which you can stack I mentioned before the focus on energy, but stacking those incentives and finding ways that you can create internal opportunities that will then externalize are both important ideas. So now we're going to talk about the community scale energy project that we did last year. Next slide. And this project was a DOE community scale grant. The grant was $1.4 million and provided half of the project cost. The tribe then had a partnership with a solar company. The company invested a certain portion, and then the tribe had a 20% to pay through a power purchase agreement. Next slide. The interesting thing about this community scale solar project is the vast array of projects that the tribe was able to accomplish. The tribe installed solar at 15 tribally owned facilities. And it was a tough process. There are a lot of considerations to think through when you're trying to decide where to install. And I think the process in and of itself is probably worthy of a conference like this. Some of the things that you have to consider are whether the buildings are capable of holding roof mounts. So are they constructed to a capacity that they can use solar? And you want to think through energy efficiency. Is it worthwhile to install solar on buildings that simply aren't efficient to begin with? So if you have consistently high energy bills because you're not efficient, then, and several of these grants require a specific offset, you may think about incorporating energy efficiency first so that it lowers the requirement for the amount of energy you have to meet for that offset. So all in all, the project is providing between 20 and up to 97% of the power for each individual location, and it's nearly a 1 megawatt project. Next slide. There are a number of projects that Potawatomi continues to consider, including small-scale biomass on or near the reservation, specifically for reservation parcels. Biomass can be a challenge, especially if you have a Class 1 redesignation. What we've found is that we have to be very careful with how we implement certain projects. But it's still a viable option. There are a number of other options, whether it be solar, geothermal, or a combination of those, or energy efficiency and a combination of all of those things. And I think one of the important lessons from our work is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to energy on reservations or to energy for specific tribes. What works for one tribe may not work for another. In Crandon, where the reservation is, there is no wind shear. So although we've considered and we've looked at the possibility of installing windmills, it simply wouldn't be feasible. Next slide. And I think with that, I turn it over to Randy.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks, Travis. Thanks, Lizana. We'll go into questions now. And I'll remind the audience, you can ask your questions in two ways. You can type your question and send it that way, or you can click the raise your hand icon and I'll unmute you. We have one written question so far, and it is, are job numbers the same regardless of location, skill level is assumed?
I'm sorry, Randy, I missed that question. Could you read it one more time?
Sure. Sure. Are job numbers the same regardless of locations? Skill level is assumed.
So addressing the first part of the question, no. Generally, the JEDI model does things at the state level, but there are ways to modify it to do a county analysis, or if you're looking specifically at tribal territory, you can do it based on your own economic indicators. The difficulty there is that a lot of the data that people use to change the model functioning to suit their own particular area, that data is available in IMPLAN, I-M-P-L-A-N, which is a data service, and you can get that data elsewhere, but it's difficult to capture for tribes. Sometimes the measures aren't either accurate or not available. So unless you have a good sort of handle on what your particular indicators are, it might be difficult to do it specifically for tribal territory. But those numbers will change based on the region, the region under analysis.
Thanks, Travis. There's another question. Oh, go ahead. Was someone going to say something? Okay. Yes, there was a question regarding access to the recording and slides, and they will be posted on the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs website in no more than 1 week. Our apologies, by the way, for the late posting of the May 25th webinar. We had some technical problems, but that's resolved, and I noticed that that webinar has been posted. The next question, would the benefits for renewable energy inland be the same for biomass to electricity projects? And then the second part, there's a second part. Go ahead and answer that one, if you would.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Would the benefits for renewable energy for Indian land be the same for biomass to electricity projects?
Would they be the same to biomass? Is it that would they be the same between different technologies? Is that the question, or am I misunderstanding?
Right, that's all I have. Let me read the second part. Which departments and agencies should be approached for these projects?
Well, I think it's important to note that each type of project is going to have different benefits and drawbacks, and that has to be analyzed kind of independently on a tribe-by-tribe basis, because all tribes are faced with very different circumstances and different landscapes. They may be able to install solar at a very reasonable rate, whereas if you're in the middle of the prairie and you don't have enough biomass in the immediate area, unless you're growing fields and fields of switchgrass, it may be too expensive to truck in the required amount of biomass to produce the same amount of energy. So I don't know that it's an easy question to answer. I think there are multiple considerations. As for the agencies, Lizana is just a tremendous resource. Sorry, Lizana. But in addition, I think that there are just so many knowledgeable people, even at other tribes, and I've found that tribes are very supportive of each other's work, so it's very easy for them to kind of reach out and mentor each other.
And to follow up on that, Sarah, as far as where to look, I think it depends on where in the process you may be. If you are exploring new technology on the research and development side, the DOE Biomass Program would be one place to contact. If you're looking at resource assessments, Department of Interior's Division of Energy and Minerals currently has a funding opportunity announcement out now that I think closes next week, but that would be some place to contact for technical assistance as well as for those resource assessments. If you are looking to implement or deploy a biomass or any other clean energy technology project on tribal lands, the Office of Indian Energy would be a good place, as well as in a rural environment. USDA has a huge number of grants and loan combinations. If you're looking at early planning phases, I would say technical assistance through the Office of Indian Energy. There's also the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development, who has SEDS grants. So there's just a tremendous amount of resources. On our website, we have not only try to keep track of the current grants through the various agencies, but also a context and agencies and where to look depending on which phase or step of a project development you may be in. Hopefully that helps. I know it's a lot.
I might as well add two more. The California Energy Commission just released an announcement for development, demonstration, and deployment of environmentally and economically sustainable biomass to energy systems for the forest and wood sectors. So subscribe to any state energy office newsletter so you can be notified of various funding announcements like this. And I know New York State is very active as well, and there are many states in between those two states that have a lot of activities and programs, as well as environmental groups that are out there. They also have their own newsletters and sort of monitor this stuff. So another question, in researching biomass, did you look at making wood pellets, biobricks, or only generating power? And second and the second part of that, if you researched others, what were the results?
The tribe has looked at a number of different biomass options. Everything from the tribe's reservation, Forest County's reservation is in Forest County. And as the name probably implies, it is heavily forested. The tribe owns very heavily forested land and then is surrounded by national and state forest. So we have looked at being able to utilize that. Unfortunately, that wouldn't supply the amount necessary. There is also in Superior, which is just to the northeast of the tribe's reservation, there is a biomass facility, and that facility takes biomass waste from east to west in the northern part of the state, so from the Mississippi River over to the Great Lakes. So there's already some competition for biomass. We have looked at pelletizing. I think one of the things you want to consider when you consider pelletizing is that the process itself is energy intensive. So are you necessarily gaining benefit if you're using an energy-intensive process to create a way to make energy? And that's not always the case, but that was one of the things that we ran into. We also considered switchgrass and pelletizing switchgrass. Switchgrass, I think, over the next several years could become more popular, and I say could because it's a crop that grows quickly, and you can plant several in a season, but it doesn't have the same value as a source of generation. So I think, again, it's just we did look at a number of different options, and it's just a matter of finding the right combination.
And Sarah, one more question for you. Would you comment on the economics of the Potawatomi project so far? For example, the net savings after costs and net proceeds from sales to outside.
The net savings, and I used to have a number. I'm kind of waiting for our updated carbon reports. We do quarterly carbon reports, and I haven't received one in a little while, so my numbers are going to be a little off. But the net savings is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, and I say that's on the low end. One of the things that we found is that the energy efficiency measures alone resulted in that much savings, but now as we're generating more energy, we don't have a full year yet of generation to know exactly what the savings will be. What we're finding so far is, and we are tracking it on a monthly basis, what we're finding so far is that our preliminary analyses were very close to what we actually are generating. However, one of the problems that we weren't necessarily considering is just whether or not we can, so in winter, for example, we don't have anybody right now taking the snow off of the ground mounts. So that impacts production. And we had kind of a more static production number. So we're trying to wait until we receive those results before we really say where we are. But the results look very, very promising. The solar project from last count had saved the tribe over $100,000 just on the production, and that's not even a yearly number or the annual number as of yet. As for the amounts that we make off of sale to the various utilities, with the solar installations, we tried to size those in a way that there wouldn't be sale of electric to the utilities. Unless you're under a net metering approach, your wholesale rate of sale to the utility is not necessarily something that's going to make those projects viable. So we tried to undersize the projects to a point where we wouldn't be overproducing and be selling electric production to the utilities, because it simply doesn't make the same rate. With respect to the We Energies, I believe it is a 7-cent rate, and our biodigesters were down for some mechanical repairs for a couple of months. So again, unfortunately, I just don't have the numbers right now.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. One more question for you. What level of tribal council support was required, and to what extent were their champion council departments? Many tribes have opportunities, but there needs to be someone to move the projects forward.
I would say that's one of the most challenging aspects of tribal energy projects. I'm fortunate to work with a tribe and an executive council that has a very aggressive goal and a very aggressive plan. But this is one of those questions that I've answered a lot over the last few years. One of the things I think that's important is to have buy-in, not just at the executive council level. Instead of going top down, try going bottom up. One of the mistakes that we made in this last project was that we were so dependent on executive council approval that we didn't do enough with tribal members in garnering support for our various installations. And what I've found is that establishing that support at the base and with members, and then moving that up is very, very helpful. Each grant opportunity requires an executive council resolution or similar approval from the tribe in order to accept the grant and to move the proceeds into a program. So there is a certain amount of approval that is needed. But one of the things I think is most important is building capacity within the tribe from tribal members, environmental professionals, attorneys, and throughout the organization, so that you have a team that's dedicated to moving these projects forward once you have the buy-in from all of the various parties.
Thank you, Sarah. And Lazan, this one will require your crystal ball, so I'll wait a second for you to pull it out. And
okay, wait, just a second. Not there. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Will these programs through NREL and DOE outlive the Obama administration?
Okay. You know, we have been doing tribal energy within the department since the mid-90s, since the passage of the Energy Policy Act of 1992. That was amended in 2005. And you know, in the early days, you know, my nails were short. We'd hang on every year and, you know, hope. But I think that Indian Energy might be neutral. So my hope, and I'm betting my career on it at this point, is that they will.
Excellent. And this may be for you, Sarah. Are there solar installs at the Carter location?
We're actually working on a project right now to do a solar install at the Carter Casino. One of the ideas there is we're changing our wastewater facilities at that casino and currently have 2 lagoons. Those lagoons will no longer be used. So one of the ideas is to either float solar on the lagoons or fill the lagoons and use that as an area for solar for the casino, the C-store, and surrounding area. So that's a project that is actually on my desk as we speak.
Okay, great. And does it matter if tribes are in a regulated utility state with a monopoly investor-owned utilities versus deregulated states? And then I might as well throw in, you have a variety of public power utilities, including co-ops and municipalities.
So I can take that one, or take a first crack. So I guess it would sort of affect maybe if you are going to build a large project and anticipate selling the electricity. If you're in a deregulated state, you'll have access. You can be an independent power purchaser and you can access the energy markets. If you are in a regulated state, then the utility is really going to be your only bet in terms of off-taker, contract counterparty for your power purchase agreement. So it might matter there. In terms of, it might also matter in terms of rates. What kind of rate structure you're on. If your commercial buildings have demand charges, there's no real sort of correlation as to type of utility and the rate that's going to offer, but you might see some more lenient rates with some of these cooperatives, or the more customer responsiveness to rate structures with cooperatives and munis and things like that are going to be a little closer to their customers than the IOUs, the investor-owned utilities. So I would say those would be the major differences. So not necessarily directly affecting economic impact, but could affect energy savings, could affect what kind of financial arrangement you have for your project.
Thank you, Travis. And I may add here as well, we are promoting tribal utility partnerships, and so if you're interested in learning about how to establish a strong partnership with your local serving utility, please do contact us through the technical assistance request that was on the screen earlier. And there was also a request for information on whom to contact for technical assistance in New York, and I'll put up the email contact list in just a bit, and Lizanna would be that a good point of contact. Anything to add on that, Lizanna?
I'm going to jump in here. Another good resource for incentives and possible funding in your area is the Desire website. And I can't remember if it's org or com, and if you do it, you'll go places you didn't really expect. But if you go to the database of state incentives, and for renewable energy, I think is what it is, it'll provide information on policies, interconnections, funding and incentives for your particular state and area. So again, that's a wonderful resource.
Okay, great. Let's see what other questions we have real quick. Bear with me as I scroll through this list. Okay. Sarah, I think you mentioned the past 30% tax credit that the private solar company partner took advantage of. Does this mean that the company is the owner of the project? And if so, how did you get around the problem posed by double taxation at the state or local level? If not, how did the tribe pass along the tax credit to the company? And maybe this could have been you too, Travis.
The way that this was set up, the tribe partnered with this company, and they created a separate LLC. And that separate LLC is has the ability to use or to generate those tax credits. And because the tribe doesn't have tax implications, all of the tax credits are given directly to the partner of this LLC, the other partner of the LLC. That was the cleanest way to do it. I know that when we were when the tribe was going through the process of creating the LLC, that we were in pretty close contact with DOE to make sure that there wasn't any reason that this would somehow jeopardize the grant. But again, I look at that as one of those times where you stack whatever incentives you can to end up with the best cost at the end of the project.
Okay, great. And Travis, anything to add on the tax side?
No, we get a lot of questions about this, and some of it can be kind of theoretical, but Potawatomi has been very successful in looking into this and executing on it. So I would take Sarah's advice on this one. So I'd probably just sort of spout tax rules, and that's not what.
Well, it's not an easy thing.
No, it's not at all. So I'm just saying, like, you've done it, so yeah.
Right. The concept is good, and one of the things about those credits, though, is that there is a sunset associated with those credits, and it's not for several years, but that 30% starts to decrease at a certain point. So you're going to get more out of a project sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. There's a request for the web address for technical assistance and the other links, Lizana, that you mentioned. And Lizana, you probably have that address off the top of your head if you want to provide it.
If you just search DOE Indian Energy, you should get to our office's page, and along the top is technical assistance and gives you information, and you can complete the online form there. What's the other one you wanted to desire? Website?
I mentioned USDA, so again, I think probably internet searches for most of those.
Yeah. So most of those, and we also have a table, a tool on our website that shows you and gives you links for each of the funding sources by project, by phase, and then we have a current funding table that provides the information on open funding opportunities. So if you Google Indian Energy, that'll get you started, and if not, we have a link on the main page, lower right-hand corner, that you can send to us, and we can answer any specific questions you might have.
Okay, great. And let's go to the raised hands real quick. That's all the written questions at this time. I think I saw one raised hand. And John Clancy, you had your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you so you can ask the question directly. You're unmuted. John, you may be muted on John Clancy. Okay, I'm going to re-mute you and just again if you come back. Let's see, there's a question from Peggy Plate. She has her hand raised. Peggy, I've unmuted you. Feel free to ask your question.
I just did that by accident, sorry.
That's all right. Let's see if there's any other hands raised here. That looks like all the hands that were raised, or maybe one more written question. Thank you all for doing this webinar. You're making a livable planet for our children, so a nice compliment there. And that, I think, will conclude the webinar. Let me go to the upcoming webinars. We still have 5 left, as mentioned earlier. Also, if you feel you have a presentation, it's for one of these. We're always
Randy,
yes.
Randy, you're cutting in and out for some reason.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Here are the remaining webinars. We hope to see you all at these webinars. And again, we thank our speakers, Sarah and Lozana, and we'll talk to you all next month. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you.